Hash and circle up.
Welcome to On, the Hash House Harrier podcast for interviews, history, and stories. I'm your host, Ra. Just a note to audio listeners, this podcast has video. All the podcasts are on YouTube, and Spotify actually allows you to play the video version. Enjoy however you listen or watch these podcasts. Today on the podcast, we're at the home of hashing in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, with a person who's been hashing about 4 decades and is official historian of mother hash. So we'll get all kinds of stories of hashing and history from before almost any of us were born. Welcome on the podcast today, PilsBarry. Welcome.
Thanks, Ra. Much appreciated.
Let's go through your origin story. When, where, and how did you get to your first hash?
It's interesting. It almost didn't happen. My girlfriend at the time just returned from Sierra Leone, where she ran with the hash. And this was back to Calgary. And she says, when you go hash, come with me. It's a running club. And I go, I really don't like running. New girlfriend and all. So you do the thing, you suck it up and you go. And sure enough, I go there and I found out it wasn't running at all. From that day on, I fell in love. So I guess I started in Calgary in 1985.
I don't know if we'll ask this, but at some point we'll find out what happened to that Sierra Leone hasher from 40 years ago. So Sierra Leone hash was running in 1985. How long had Calgary been going?
Calgary was just in its infancy. I joined just before Run 25. And then they had these wonderful long sleeve T-shirts that they issued for the 25th, the 50th, and the 75, which I still have, by the way. And it's a little cold there, so those long sleeve T-shirts were really quite well received.
Heavy duty cotton, not something you can wear in Malaysia, I would think.
No, you try to stay away from that. It's kind of like one of those air dry singlets these days.
What was Calgary like? You remember how many people were there and those 50 or so runs and before 100?
So it was a bunch of guys who'd returned, I guess, with the oil industry from Southeast Asia, and they brought the hash back with them. There was a guy from the PJ Animals, a guy from a Mother Hash, and a fellow from Jakarta. And I guess as they talked to one another, as the hash does, they said, hey, why don't we start a hash? I think the first time I ran, there was like about 15 people. And funny enough about that club, in the middle of winter, when it gets below minus 30, they get some of their largest turnouts. So
Yeah.
I was at one and there was like over, I would say almost 50 people there, all looking bib, the Michelin tire guy, all bundled up. But yeah, so it's good.
Do you remember any of the names of those early expats that got that thing started that were around?
There's a Polish guy there, Daniel, and I can't pronounce his last name and nobody else could either. I had so many consonants in it. He was just known simply as Alphabet.
That's great.
There's another guy there. I think his name was Blair Anderson. They just called him Trash. And there's a story there, as there is with most names. And then I think probably one of the longtime guys there, a fellow by the name of Doug Jury, if I recall. I don't think any of them are there. Maybe Doug is perhaps, but I don't know if he still runs. Yeah, that was a long time ago. I last ran with him in 87, I'd say.
Yeah, some of the Calgary guys will hear this and the hashers out there, we'll see if they can track them down. Maybe we'll have a chat with those guys too.
Sure.
What about your name? Where'd that happen and what was the story there?
It's convoluted. My girlfriend at the time, her hash name was Cookie. She got that because she used to bring cookies to the run for after the run, which is nice. They were homemade cookies, quite sought after, I might say. And then my real name is barrydawe, which they convert into PilsBarry Doughboy.
Now I get it. I knew it was from your first name. I didn't connect the last name.
And so then it just became PilsBarry, and then most people who I know, they just call me Pills.
Yeah, that's great. And where did that happen?
First named in Calgary, the Doughboy part of it. And then when I got to Malaysia, it got renamed. Not on Mother, by the way. It was a different club I was running with. And that's what was actually the 𝐏𝐬𝐬 hash. I was right behind one of the founders there. I was the GM of that hash for some time.
Wow.
And
So you got the mother hash in 1987.
yes, yeah, I
And
did.
when you were there, what else was going on hashing in KL or locally that you hashed with in the first couple of years?
Ooh. The general area is called the Klang Valley, and at one time there were about 60 clubs in the Klang Valley. As I say to people, you could find a hash that ran the day that you wanted to run, and it had the right balance of how much beer you wanted to drink and how much running you wanted to do. That was perfect. You could
Yeah.
find something that just fit the pistol. I think about that time there was about maybe 20 clubs, I'm going to guess. And so I ran with a couple of them, the Mother Hash and the KL Harriettes.
We'll talk about history of the mother hash, key milestones and myths and legends and facts. But what about getting in? At some point, there have been waiting lists and things like that. What was it when you joined? Just walk up and no invitation needed? How'd that work?
At that time, probably best to look at it this way is that they had a cap, but they hadn't quite reached it. And basically, if he showed any sort of half-assed reasonable aptitude for showing up, you were welcome. On the proviso, of course, that you're a male.
Yeah.
Mother Hash always has been they call it a Batang chapter or just men only.
What was the local makeup then in 87 and how was that changing?
Oh, okay. Good questions. The demographics have changed not only in terms of who's there, but also the age of the people. It was probably a lot of guys in their 30s and 40s, and some of those are still with us. Of course, they're now 40 years older. I think our oldest runner is 84, 85. And you'd think our average age was going up, which it was, but more recently we made an effort and we've got quite a number of guys who are in their 30s and 40s. So our average age has come way down. That's actually pretty good because we're known as setting if you will, some of the tougher runs in the Klang Valley. It's usually about 12K plus or minus one. And you got to be booking it. So it's pretty fast, pretty good running club. So that's the age. We got a little older. Now we're getting a little younger, if you will. At the time, I would say in terms of makeup, mostly expatriates, about 80% expatriate and 20% national. Now it's probably the other way around. Most of our expatriates, we have a good number in what we call our OSM or our outstation members list, guys who still want to be part of the club, but to no longer live in KL. They get 4 free runs a year and almost always show up. Got to get my beer.
37, 38 years ago, what was KL like that is different from today? If you had gone in, stayed there 6 months and come back today, what would you say? How's KL changed?
A couple things all got to do with growth. At that time, there was only like about 1.5 million people, and now there's pretty close to 6 in the area. That's a lot of stuff. I don't know if it's a little boring this, but like compound growth, for the longest time, the growth was in excess of 10%. So that means you take that number and put it into 70. That means every 7 years, the volume is doubled.
Yeah.
Most of that was happening in KL. Then and now, they're just 2 very different cities. As far as the hash goes, what that means though is we used to have to drive about 10 kilometers, but it'd take an hour because the infrastructure wasn't there. Now we have to drive about 50 to 70 kilometers, but it still takes an hour.
That's great. Yeah.
So we just have to go further afield to find some continuous running.
As an expat there, were you part of the deluxe expat terms at the beginning with a driver and free to drink? How did that work for most people?
I'd say the days of the driver were pretty much done probably by the 60s, I'd say. Unless you're like a corner office kind of guy, you might have a driver. It's not like Jakarta. It's quite easy to drive here. In Jakarta, you can't drive just because of insurance and all those kind of boring things. But quite reasonable. It's a little madness the first time. It's on a different side of the road compared to Canada, but you get used to that stuff. It's not bad.
How long did it take you to get involved with herring and get involved with mismanagement of a club. For KL, there's kind of one official position, and it's a small list. I guess more people have walked on the moon than been on sec for KL, but maybe not that many more.
You had a couple of questions there, so let me just back up a bit. If you show up, they try to get you to set a run after you've had about 4 or 5 runs under your belt. They pair you up with an experienced hare who generally steers you into trouble because you're not smart enough to know why or anything better. And so you learn pretty quick, and the runs are pretty good. If you've not been in the jungle before, or the plantations, the oil plantations, or the rubber, it's a bit daunting the first time, but after that, it's just quite wonderful. You set runs pretty early. With the committee, really, it's just the OnSec, and he runs the club. He has a committee that works for him, basically, but they rarely have a committee meeting. Everything's just done by decision of OnSec, and it runs amazingly simply. But it's always been that way. So if there's any issues on the day, OnSec makes a decision, that's it, it's done. If you don't like it, you just have to wait a year.
And that's 1 year. Have people repeated as OnSec, or is it a once you get one shot?
It's traditionally been once only. However, in the very early years when there was like 5 founders, it didn't take long to rotate through 5 people. So a couple of those guys were OnSec twice. I think there's only been 2, maybe 3 people that have been OnSec more than once.
What about getting involved in mismanagement of other clubs then? You were GM of at least one. What was the process of those? Were you running with co-ed clubs?
When I ran with the 𝐏𝐬𝐿, of course, that mismanagement set up to be run by women. It's a bunnies club, so, no chance. To be honest with you, more politics than I would have liked, so quite happy with that outcome, to be honest. But I spent a bunch of time on the East Coast in the state of Terengganu, and the Kurte hash had just started up. I was with the mother hash, got a fair bunch of background, and we're always having trouble finding people. So if you even turned your head the wrong way, you were on the committee. So that was pretty easy to do.
How was it for you in committees? Does that align with your professional life, and did they have regular meetings? Are they more traditional?
As I say, with the mother hash, basically OnSec runs the club, so he just says, I need some help here. He calls people up, and people say, yeah, what do you want? It's done.
Yeah.
I've had that position myself, and it's, as I've said to some people, 2 things are going to happen. When you become OnSec of the mother hash, the first thing that happens is you lose your name. You are no longer Bill, Bob, or Doug. You are OnSec. And that's what everyone calls you. That's your new name for the year. And the second thing is you don't really figure out what you can do with the club until you're almost done for the year. You're just starting to get your way through it all and figured it out. Time to go.
What about the year after then? Did you have a role? Did the new OnSec that took on after you come and talk to you, or does everybody just say, let's take my flavor?
Yeah, we have continuity in terms of the operations of the club. The last year's OnSec becomes JM1, or Joint Master 1. Joint Master 2 looks after the hairline, and of course there's a hash cache. And then after that, it's all ex officio. I'm the official Hashtorian. We have a videographer. We had a guy who used to play music, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. What's unique to the mother hash is that it also has it's an ex officio group, and it's called the Hash Council. It's comprised of ex-OnSec joint masters and on-caches. There's criteria around how you get to stay on and stuff like that, but the councils call whenever the OnSec wants to call them. And he usually does that about twice a year. Once at the beginning of the year to say, this is my plans for the club. And he just throws it out there, and then we just give him feedback, and he can say, thank you very much. And then he makes up his own decisions. He doesn't have to do anything we say. We just tell him about stuff within our experience. That worked really well. That didn't work well. That was tried before, and it was blah, 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 blah. So it's just good guidance. And then typically what happens is just before he's done, he calls another council meeting to say, this is who I want for the next OnSec. Then he gets more feedback and makes his own decision.
That's great. So it is one person running the club and selecting the next OnSec.
He proposes them. There's an official AGM process that we have to follow. And it's not as though other people haven't been put forward, but rarely have they been successful. I think only once in the entire history of the club's time that someone was nominated from the floor that actually succeeded.
What was the run up for you to become OnSec? How long had you been there? When were you ready to do it? And who decided you were ready to do it?
I can't tell you the in behind who decided with particular reference to myself, but the way the process is, you probably got to be there at least 10 years so you understand what Mother Hash is about. And you got to set a lot of runs. You've seen a lot of stuff. You will have had to have been on the committee at some point in time and see how things work. And then I guess it's just OnSec decides this looks like he'll be a good candidate, and then he proposes to the council and they give him feedback, and then it just happens. As I say, it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, somebody had to tell you they were going to nominate you.
Yeah.
And how long ahead of it's now your job does that happen in your case?
You just can't get railroaded, and we don't want any reluctant brides, if I could use that. I'm not trying to be sexist here, that expression. Everyone who's asked, they have to agree, of course. It's got to work. And so it does. It works out pretty well.
Yeah.
I think one thing I could say on that is that if you advertise that you want to be the OnSec of the Mother Hash, you will never be the OnSec of the Mother Hash. It's not a job that you can ask for, because it will never come your way.
No campaigning. That's brilliant. All right, let's talk about a couple of the other events that have just happened in the intervening decades. 1998, another interhash. 2018, Rumble back to Mother Hash, and in between other things. How much gearing up, and does the OnSec take on management of that event if it happens during his term, or is that a separate run thing?
That's a whole separate committee with its own separate organizing chairman.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about the historical ones. What I can tell you is how it actually works in 2028, which seems like a long way away, but planning an event like this, it's really not that far away. We've already got a organizing committee, a chairman, and we're planning to have our 90th year of running on September the 8th, 2028. We're already organizing it, and we're starting to put together our advertising, line up everything, and make it all happen.
People will now know the date even before the flyers and banners get out there now. That's okay. That's great. Get it on the calendars. Do you expect to have a role? Are you going to be part of that?
I don't think there's any way I could not be.
Brilliant.
We're anticipating somewhere in the neighborhood of more than what we had at the 80th, and we had 2,400 register for that, because we're going to put more effort into advertising this time. So maybe somewhere between that number and maybe 3,000. And
yeah, great.
So that would require every member of the club to be involved.
Wow. I remember in 1998, Merdeka Stadium, I don't know who told me, it seemed like a bunch of people told me, said, oh, they're going to knock this down. And then in 2018, Merdeka Stadium, and oh, it's going to get knocked down. Are we going to be back in Merdeka?
I can't say we're a bit ahead of that answer. We're looking at the number of venues. We have 4 on the list right now. And we just got to find one that works with the sensibilities of the hash.
Sure. That's brilliant. That's really good news. Of course, it won't be an inter-hash event. There'll be an inter-hash that year, and hopefully they can coordinate their timing. What about history then? When did you get involved, and why did you get involved, and what did it take to pick up what had been done and take on the role of hash historian for Mother Hash?
If the truth be told, I fell into it. Nobody said, hey, you, can you do this? I think in some regards you have to have a little bit of a passion for it. It is, if nothing, a labor of love. Yeah, but because it's a lot of background stuff that people just don't see. And to be honest, and I can get that, a lot of people just don't care about it until they get into a discussion about what really happened. I'm quite impressed with the Mother Hash records. They've got over 7,000 digital records, and I've got more to scan. And as I say, it could be a full-time job, but it's getting chipped away. It's pretty interesting, though. And the things that you ferret out from the past, we've pretty much got run circulars all the way back to the end of the 50s. And the ones in the 40s and the early 50s, they're quite spotty. But unfortunately, a lot of those guys, they either didn't save the circulars or a lot of them weren't mailed at the time. So you have to go to places like newspaper records and go back through an old fiche machine, which we've done some of that.
What do you think is the oldest piece of documentation that you have? A contemporary piece, not a retrospective piece, somebody that was created at the time it's dated.
Probably the earliest hard data we have is some run circulars that were just after the post-war, just after they restarted.
Wow.
And we have some correspondence and some anecdotal stuff, but the only hard issued by the club stuff is some of those early run circulars.
There's some famous hashers who also had a passion for history and documentation, like people like Magic and Tumbling Bill.
Yep.
Your name is going to go in this little grouping of people that put an enormous amount of hours into all this. What was the state of the documentation that you found, and what did you think you were going to be doing when you took it over? What did you think you would find?
One of our original members, original as far as I'm concerned, a fellow by the name of Ted Quirk, he happened to get a bunch of the hash circulars from one of our long-standing members, John Duncan, who's long since passed away. And he basically digitized a lot of those. Unfortunately, some of the boxes that John had his circulars in disappeared, so we have a little gap of 3 years. There was a lot of stuff that was still yet to be scanned. So as far as the newsletter goes, I've pretty much got that all in. And by talking to people, reaching out, we pretty much backfilled everything, as I say, almost to the late 50s, 1959. Got almost complete listing of all the circulars. Some of them there's a gap, but it might be that it was never issued. We'll never know the answer to that question. So not only that, there's council meetings, there's lots of stuff to do with the Register of Societies, just all that administrative paperwork. And a lot of it's really quite interesting in terms of what you find in there. We're in the process of redoing the number of members through history. And it's really quite fascinating. It's just all kinds of wonderful things.
When you're developing the story of the history of hashing and the history of Mother Hash, you're digging through individual papers to find factoids and timelines. Yeah.
So the first broad strokes were done by actually personal correspondence with Horst Thompson and Frank Woodward, some of the original guys who were there in the late 30s, early 40s, and their recollections. And then what we discovered through that is that, of course, the mind is not the best eyewitness. Any lawyer will tell you that. And there are inconsistencies there, even within the accounts of these various individuals. So then you're left with, okay, who's more right? Where does the actual story lie? And this gave rise to what I call the great misunderstanding. I think it's probably way out there in the hash world all over the place. And the RSC's involvement with the hash and their claim that they're the home of the hash, and the place where all the folks stayed, which was officially called the Bachelor's Quarters Building, was commonly referred to and known as the Royal Selangor Club Annex. Okay. They didn't own the building at all.
Royal Selangor didn't own the dorm.
No, it was owned by the colonial government. But it became so common knowledge because it was just across the street from the club. A lot of the people who lived there were probably members of the club. We don't know exactly because unfortunately, I think 1950, they had a big fire and a large number of the RSC's records were destroyed. And interesting to note, at that time, it wasn't the Royal Selangor Club. It was just the Selangor Club. Royal didn't come until much later down the line. So if you go back and look at all these old things, they never refer to it as the RSC. They call it the Selangor Club. But as I say, that came about just because they were members there, proximity, or that the RSC anecdotally provided services in the management of the building or offered privileges to the billets at the club. So the link was made, and it was just commonly referred with the misunderstanding as the Selangor Club's building, and it in fact wasn't.
Okay, so what we have is the founding of the hash. Again, the data, that seems to be maybe a little murky too. We don't have a record.
There's, again, this is where we get back into personal correspondence, and there's some disagreement there. Probably the strongest that we have is a letter from Frank Woodward. He was one of the original members, and he puts in his timeline that if you work through, that gets you into sometime in December 1938. Then there's some other things that if you look at and do some math around the 117 runs pre-war, and when they started up post-war and back up, that gets you into 1939. So which is right? The preponderance, in my view, is probably the solidest information is Frank Woodward's personal recollections. And it seems to tie, he's got a number of references in there that make a bunch of sense. And this information we have and we've shared with other people. Because as I say, we're trying to make sure the story's right.
Now, it's probably at this point, with all the research you've done, it's as sussed out as it can be. And again, there's a level of confidence with the answer. That's a good explanation of it. High probability, but no certainty. What about then the war and what happened after? What is clearly known about the restarting of the hash after the war?
And again, I don't have the hard documentation of this other than it was an interview that was done some long time ago. So this again is a recollection, and it's got a lot of charm to it. He discovered that as a result, there was an old tin cup in a bath, and he made a claim for war reparations, which they received, and then they started, right? And so if you back up and assume that they've run every day, we can pretty much figure out when they started post-war, but we don't actually have a circular for that run.
What about the people involved and the traditions and the name? And what do you know about that? Did it look the same?
There is a history as to how it all happened to come about. After the war, there was the Communist Party in Malaysia, which you say, what have they got to do with hashing? They caused the colonial government to create what's called the Register of Societies, because they at the time passed a 3-person rule that if any more than 3 people were meeting without being registered, they were going to jail. And this was a way to control the Communist Party and its ability to organize and cause mayhem, which they did, by the way. So we had to register, and we then registered, and I think that was in, I think it was 1952. I'll have to go back and check the exact date. And that was done by the OnSec at the time, Kennedy, and he put together the Constitution that's been out on there with our 4 tenets, all that good sort of stuff. So that came about then. But the 3-person rule was actually prior to that. Mother Hash didn't come along until much later. And exactly when, I think that's going to be something that's lost to history. There's a couple reasons for that. In Bahasa, which is the local language here, they refer to the head office as the Ibu Pejabat. Pejabat means office. Ibu means mother. So in Bahasa, in the local language, the starting of everything is the mother this or the mother that, the mother office. So anecdotally, I would say that's how the mother hash came about. But there's also other views around how it came about as well, and they're all equally valid. But I like to answer that one.
And these guys, as far as you can tell by having reviewed those documents, were they doing runs outside of KL? Were they traveling and doing weekend trips that they considered hash runs?
I'm not aware of any weekend trips. They did runs outside of the city, but remember at that point in time, the city limits weren't that extensive. I look at some of these run locations and there's no bush to be found there at all.
Oh, yeah.
That sort of stuff. The first one post-war was purported to have been run around what is now the old racetrack, which is where the Twin Towers sit on that area. So no, it's no longer hashing territory, mate.
That's great. When was this idea that there would be an OnSec and they would run the club for a year? Is that quite soon after the restart after the war? Is that apparent from the documentation?
If you look at the listing of the members of the officers of the club, it's been pretty much like that right from the beginning, with the exception in the very early years, they didn't have enough members to swap everybody out. They just played a shuffleboard. So a couple of members were OnSec a couple times. OnCash didn't come into being until some time later. I have the exact dates of when all of those positions were created and filled and who's in them or who was in them and all that sort of stuff. But to this day, though, the current OnSec gets a jacket or a vest, and it's his badge of office, but on it has the lists of every OnSec by the year, through the year, up until the guy he just got the jacket from. So it's only his jacket for a year. It's a traveler. I think it's kind of,
people make a duplicate and keep that, huh?
some guys do. They make a duplicate right up until their year, and they can wear that. Yeah, but it's not the guy.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. You explained some of the murkiness and some of the misunderstanding. What else about hash history do you think is misunderstood or underestimated or overstated? What do you think about that?
I think pretty much every club basically follows the same sort of tenets, but they do it in their own way. Mother Hash has never named anybody. If you come to us and want us to name you, we will name you, but we do not name our own members. We don't ice. That came from somewhere else. We do have a circle. It's brilliantly funny sometimes and painfully boring at others, but all circles are like that. But most of them are pretty good. Good chuckle for sure. As I'm aware, I don't know of any other club that operates the way we do with an OnSec. And basically one man runs the show for the year. It's the ultimate simplicity.
Yeah. Are you aware of Rumson Hash?
I've heard of them, but I don't know much about them.
They're a late 70s hash, all men, 10:17 on a Saturday morning, no run fee, no circle, no names. They have a guy who has just come to be OnSec for life. And they really have no other officers at all. They don't have a circle. They don't have names. They don't have cash. Just back when they were Hellraisers, everybody would just do the run and put $5 on the bar, and somebody would start buying Bud Light pitchers till they ran out and put more.
There you go.
I think they have a certain bit of pride of thinking that they are. Some of their members say, we're not even a hash. We don't do anything. But they do have a trail and all that stuff. But that might be the closest thing. And they're a well-loved hash in America because of their distinctiveness from most other clubs. Yeah, it's just like Mother Hash is very distinctive. It's great. You'll see people all over the world who have Mother Hash shirts, whether they've run with Mother or not. And
that's all right. I think that's all good. That's all good. I love the way some of these guys write their letters, the English they use and the words and the way in which they call them. One that strikes me is they called the Hash Club a gentleman's chummery. And I go, brilliant. But they had some unique ways of describing, and the best way I can put it is everything needs to be as simple as possible, but no simpler than it needs to be. And they have very eloquent ways of saying that. And I read these letters and I just split a gut. It's just hilarious. Just the color of the language, and it's fantastic.
Over the history of these, let's say the last 65 years when other clubs have existed, there have been probably more clubs that have died than there are clubs still alive in the world. And Mother Hash surviving for this long, nearly 90 years now. There are a lot of organizations that haven't made that many decades. A tribute to it surviving with traditions intact. And somebody from the original club would probably recognize a run today, I guess.
Pretty much, I think the major difference would be they used to drink big bottles, which is a lot of beer. They smoked a lot more than we do now, and they used to have ginger beer. When they first started up, of course, they all had drivers. So the first runs, interestingly enough, were mostly A to B or B to A runs because people had drivers. But now we do primarily A to A. We'll have live hairs, and then we'll do A to B or B to A as well. Some hair gets really adventurous. But
back to traditional shenanigans of hashing, have you had any misadventures on trail, injuries or getting lost, or in trails you've been involved with there? When have things gone completely off the rails that you remember, or nearly?
There's been a couple of incidents. One that's been well written up was the Cheras Bandits. And this was when the Communist Party of Malaysia was actually pretty active. And they were out doing a run, and they came across a bunch of these guys camping in the bush and went back to the police station, reported it, and they caught them all. Of course, there's a reward. However, if you're a government employee, you can't accept it. As I heard the story go, the three guys who weren't government employees got a substantial reward for everyone calling these guys in. So it's quite a well-known story, actually. But we've lost people. The number one rule, stay on paper. We don't lose people if they stay on paper. But if they go off paper, that bush can be pretty thick out there. I think probably the most notorious was we lost one guy for 3 days. We did find him eventually after a large amount of work. He was pretty beat up for his ordeal, but he made it out okay. And I was quite thankful. A lot of us spent a lot of time in there looking for him with search and rescue, and it all worked out well.
It didn't stop him from hashing afterwards?
No, he's still there. He's 80 plus. He doesn't run anymore, but he used to be a brain dead front runner. But he's always there to get his ration, as he says. Can't miss my ration.
Right.
I love that.
Did your opinion about running change?
No, I still hate running. Absolutely. Hashing's entirely different, mate. Think about it this way. You go out there, it's a new place every time. You don't know where you're going to go. You follow this paper trail. Then you get to a check, and then you got to say, all right, I know this hare. He's probably going to maybe do something like this. So now you're trying to get into the hare's head, and you don't even realize you're out there running, right? And then you come back. Most guys have a shower. We clean up. There's usually some refreshment post-run, like watermelon or a little snack or something. And then, of course, the sec opens up the beer wagon, and then he opens up the Guinness bar, which is well received by everybody. Then there's a circle, and then we usually have on-site honor. We go to a restaurant, and the night's done. Yeah, we're not out as late as we used to be. I've been out some days till the next day. Now we're pretty much done by, I'd say, 11 midnight. It's a lot of fun. It's definitely not running.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it sounds like a hash we'd all enjoy. What's the policy for people who show up in KL who want to go on a mother hash trail? A hasher just shows up and calls up. How's that work?
They're more than welcome. The only proviso is your mail. That's it. And we work pretty hard depending on where the guys are. Some are right downtown working, which many are. Some are out of town at different places. We try and hook them up with the members so that we get them to and from the run site and pretty much look after them. And when the food is served, they get to avoid the melee because we have a standard non-rule, guests first.
Very cool.
This way they can go right to the front of the line and get food. Otherwise, they have to fight with the masses.
Like you said, Hash Cash eventually appeared, and it's part of pretty much every club. How does Mother Hash today operate finances and run fees and requirements to hair?
Okay, we're capped at 155 members, and we were capped pre-COVID. COVID, I think, hit a lot of clubs, and we were caught just like everybody else. So we're now down to about 100. So if you say you're going to set or run every 52, 50 some odd runs a year, 100 members, you set a run once every 2 years. It's just pure rotation. However,
Yeah.
sometimes it's extended because we have this, we call it the OnSec's 10-week rule. So there's a couple guys who are notorious at setting incredibly long runs. I think the longest I did was 22K, which is absurd. So if you have to pack in 2 hours after the run start, it's a 10-weeker, which means to say you got to do it all over again in 10 weeks.
So let's get that rule straight. So if you keep people out for 2 hours, you have to set a run again and not do that.
Yeah, there's no requirement on the Mother Hash to pay for the on or pay for the dinner. But traditionally, when you're the hare, you shout the on. So you do that once every 2 years, and if you go enough times, it all works out in the wash. But that's just our style. It's all it is. But what it means in 10 weeks is you got to shout another on. So the reason is financial. You don't want to set a bad run because it's going to cost you another on.
That's great. Yeah. I don't know if you know about the 𝐏𝐧 all men's hash in Washington, D.C.
Yep.
Yeah. They have a similar operation. Somewhere between 38 and 60 weeks, you set a trail and the hare funds the beer and the food. And sometimes there's a competition there to put on the best show of the month or the best show of the year too. Yeah.
So we do have a truck from the brewery come out. So the club buys the beer. If you're an hour 45, you get fined 3 crates. If you're 2 hours, you get 3 crates plus 10 weeks. So everyone, when the front runner comes in, we go 7:46, 7:46. And he goes, no, I was in on time.
This is great. I have a feeling some people are going to hear this and say, we're going to put in some version of this rule. That's fun.
The whole point is to have consistency in the runs so that when the guys come, they know what they're getting. It's going to be a good, tough. I use I call it the 12, 2, 8, and 5. So if it's 500 vertical meters, it's an 8-kilometer run. It's a 12-kilometer run, it's 200 vertical meters. So everything in that band gets you in within that hour, half hour, 45, and everyone's happy.
Yeah. Oh, very nice. Well, let's talk about history. How long have you been doing the history project and been official hash historian?
Oof. Since about 2008, I've been as Hashtorian and just steadily working on it, trying to backfill old circulars, which we've done a pretty good job on, and then just organizing all this other stuff that we have, which they got paper out the yin yang, which needs to be digitized. And every time I go through something, I find something new that I go, oh, isn't this interesting? But
so you're collecting and organizing the documents, digitizing. What else comes out of this? I think you've made it available. You can answer questions. You can make it available to people who are doing their own research or publications, I guess. What else is going to happen with this? Do you have any goal for the 90th anniversary to have some Hashtorian report?
so for the 90th yet, that's like ahead of our planning. We haven't actually touched on that. We're sorting the bigger things out about the venues and working the major things first that need to be booked ahead of time. But the intent with the files that we have, and we automatically back them up in case my computer or whoever the working computer is, we don't lose our stuff, is to set up a members site on the website so that they can go back through and access all of this stuff. The circulars themselves are, for obvious reasons, marked private and confidential because there's sometimes some pretty interesting shenanigans in there. But yeah, gone are the days of, when they were really crazy, but that's okay. There's been some discussion in a number of circles with the Hash Heritage Foundation, which is where the clubhouse is, which, by the way, is coming along spectacularly well. It's pretty much all done. I think they're about ready to get their final certificates. Part of it is to collect things like the hash genealogy, which is what Bill Panton was doing. So he's looking at all hashes and where they came from and who begat who and all that sort of stuff. Begatting is so much fun, he tells me, or he did. And then we were thinking of putting a section of some of the selected mother hash stuff in there as well as part of the collection. But those are just longer term ideas. But the intent of putting this all together is to have it there available so that we'll just have the history of the hash there and the key documents available for people to see and check it out.
Let's
A couple of people who are currently trying to put together histories of the hash. And what I've said to them is I've been to a number of websites where people say our origins, this and that. They all share three things in common. There's lots of misunderstandings in there. There's lots of inaccuracies, and some of them are outright incorrect. There's not one I came across. It's got the story as best we understand it. So part of the mission is to try and get that all going the way it should be going and clean up some of the stuff that folks have got out there. But we're not quite ready there to update all our stuff on our website. We've updated some, but we're about getting ready to our final versions. That said, as I say, I know some folks who are currently trying to write histories, and I've been involved with the two that I know that are, one's publishing a book, another one's publishing a bunch of excerpts. And so I'm working with both of those to share with them documents and do some background research with them so that the stories, again, are trying to be as aligned as we can.
Yeah, personally, I think that once AI gets a hold of this, it's going to be important to get the stories consistent because it's going to spread like wildfire on all those inaccuracies and inconsistencies and outright wrongness is going to be part of the part of the world information. So that's great to hear.
I'd say the biggest challenge is what I call the great misunderstanding, and that was that where they stayed was the Royal Selangor Club Annex, actually the Selangor Club Annex, which in fact is not true. Even the old members and their correspondents called it that because that was the common knowledge of the day. So when someone reads their stuff, they go, oh, it's the blah, 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 which in fact, they had the wrong misunderstanding. And we've got a lot of detailed records to show that in fact was colonial government owned.
What you're saying when we take that in context and then put it in the bigger picture, the Selangor Club is not the home of hashing.
Definitely not. No, that happened outside of that. But in fairness to the club, they did have the Dog, which is the pub that was there, or the bar, and it was well frequented because it was one of the few that was around. A lot of those folks were, we believe, members, and it was just across the street, all kinds of things like that. I'm absolutely certain that they talked about the hash in that bar, but they also talked about the hash in all kinds of other bars as well. So it doesn't make them unique, but it is a connection that I can't say is not there.
Let me ask you, just to put all these different entities in frame that people can get straight now. We've got the Hash Heritage Foundation. We've got the Hash Council in Malaysia. We've got the Mother Hash Club. And you explained the Heritage or the Hash Council's overlap with Mother Hash in terms of the new OnSec has a chat with them and gets to hear what they have to say. But what about the other connections of those? How do they fit together and how do they set their own boundaries?
Okay, so the Mother Hash has been its own club, and when the Father Hash started up, They blasted a note off to the OnSec at the time and said, hey, what do we want to do? And we said, we really don't care. It's up to you. Let us know how it goes. And that started the whole independence tradition, and it's been that way ever since. We get lots of people ask us, and we say, this is what we do, but it might not be for you, but we don't tell anyone anything. But if you ask, we'll help you out as best we can. But that's how the Mother Hash behaves. And it has no link with the Malaysian Hash Council. That's a group of folks who decided that hash needed to be organized in Malaysia, of course, which is the antithesis of what the hash actually is. So the Mother has absolutely nothing to do with them because it's not hashing. So they're trying to organize it and be the representative. There's things that need to be done with the government interface, tourism. They want to be the people to do that. If you're part of that, they charge you every event. They charge you a fee per head. Now, okay, I can understand they got to operate, but there's no accounting on the money. It sounds like I'm snipping here, but it's just not as transparent as I would like it to be. So that's another reason. There's no accountability, and we don't see we're going to get any service from them because we're quite capable of looking after ourselves. Thank you very much.
All right. Now we have the Hash Heritage Foundation.
Yeah. So that's actually a society called Wawasan. That's the official name of it. And it was started quite some time ago, over 20 years ago now, where some people, hashmen, primarily from the Mother Hash, approached the government about replacing the clubhouse and asking for a government grant of land, which we eventually got. It's a very interesting piece of property. And for 20 years, unfortunately, not much happened. And there were some funds there. You got to pay quick rent, property taxes, all that sort of stuff. And it just sort of like, disappeared through those kinds of maintenance things. And then we were getting a bit concerned. And about, I don't know, 8 years ago now, the Mother Hash was concerned. We made a concerted effort for a lot of our members to pay 1,000 ringgit each and become trustees. We then, the folks who were there doing nothing with it, reorganized all the people, and now the building is now built. We raised pretty much over 500,000 ringgit to build a building. I think it was actually more than that. I don't know the exact numbers. I can get them if needs be. So the building's there, it's operational, it's being used, and it's pretty much self-funding. That particular piece of land that was granted to this foundation, and it's run by a board, mostly of hashmen from a number of clubs. And because there was concern, and this sounds a bit of a worry, there's an expression called Malaysia Boleh, like you think it can't be done, but in Malaysia it can be done. Boleh means can. So it's a very desirable piece of property being right on Bukit Kera, in between PJ and KL. I imagine it's worth a fair bit of money and very attractive to a developer to say, I'll take that and I'll give you a whole bunch of land in the middle of nowhere, which doesn't do us any good. So the whole point is to get something built on it so that things like that could not happen. And so we've been successful. It's built, land's safe, it's secured, and the hash has a home.
For the 90th anniversary, is there going to be something involving the building? Have you thought about how that'll be involved in part of the options for hash?
Of course, the ideas are out there. That's one of the many. As I say, our focus right now is to nail down the big ticket items like a venue, busing contracts. With the logistics involved in moving 3,000 people, it's a fair bit. And just think of the number of run sites. If you just want maybe 100 people at each run, so you need 3,100. Do the math. You need 30 run sites each day. So you need 30 hairs and co-hairs and sweepers, and it starts to add up. So to be honest with you, putting 3,000 people all at once on that site, I think right now, given the way its current status is, it would be pretty problematic. But 3 years from now, I know there's a lot of stuff going on right now. There's construction going on next door. That'll all be done and the place will be much more tidied up and have more space. I'm sure we'll work it in. We just don't know exactly how.
What can you say about the Hashtorian Museum that was Neptunus driven, that was trying to get established on the site, and now we know it's not going to be established there. What do you know about that, or what do you think about that?
Let me correct you there. It was actually never on the site. Neptunus had his one museum in the Netherlands, and then he started a second one here, which has moved a couple of times. And the last one was in PJ, which was a lot closer, so people who came to visit could actually go and see his museum. Okay. He's ran into some personal issues that had to have him go back to the Netherlands. And I think he's there. He won't have that resolved for another couple of months. I don't know the exact details. Of course, it's his business. So the museum that he had, everything was all packed, boxed, and it is sitting in storage at the heritage site.
Okay.
Okay.
So his stuff is stored at the heritage site.
Yes.
But we're not expecting them to accommodate a facility for it.
I wouldn't get ahead of that answer. There's been lots of talk back and forth. A lot remains to be seen, and Neptunus getting his business sorted out and what he wants to do personally. My hat's off to the guy. He's been doing all of this on his own dime and renting a place and putting that museum up. It does take a little cash, and he's been doing it all by himself. So there's clearly passion there, which, God, I'm 100% behind.
Sure, yeah.
I think that was part of the reasons why there was agreement to have him allow him to put his stuff in storage at the clubhouse.
What about the hash in terms of its relationship with the government? Just Mother Hash. Are you guys under the radar? It's a long established organization inside Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia now. What is the registered organization? Is it hands off at this point? What's going on?
No, what has to be done, and it's still the rule of the day, you have to register with the Register of Societies, which we are, and you have to file a bunch of club reports every year so that they can make sure that you're doing what you say you're doing. So that is our primary link. As and when we do have contacts with people, we expect we're going to have some conversation with folks in the government and some of the ministries with respect to the 90th. But again, those are all ideas. A lot has to happen in place to put our plan together first. And it's not as though we don't know people. You know? But what form it's actually going to take, the guess would be getting way ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, it's good news to know it's on the calendar. We got September in 2028. The 90th anniversary can be celebrated in KL.
September the 8th.
September 8, 9, and 10, 2028. Yep. Any other history blurbs that you want to get out to people? This is going to shake up people a little bit. Some of the things you casually talk about, this seems like quite run-of-the-mill stuff to you. You've thought about it and looked at it probably week in and week out for decades.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on that?
I guess I'm guilty of a little bit by association, and I'm reasonably familiar with this stuff, right? And I'm always surprised because, as I say, we'll get a batch of stuff in out of the blue somewhere from somebody that we've talked to, and they say, oh, I know a guy. And so if anyone's listening and they know a guy and they've got some stuff, get a hold of me. I'd be happy to have it, with respect to the Mother Hash, of course. And every now and again, you find a little nugget in there. There was one of our ex-OnSecs. He's passed away, unfortunately, but he had a box of stuff that just got lost in the shuffle, and it showed up at my place 3 weeks ago. And in there is a scroll talking about the Mother Hash. It's brilliant stuff. It doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but it's a bit of very cool memorabilia and a very ancient tin mug. I'm trying to understand its provenance, but I mean, it's old. Someone says, is that a real one? And I go, no, I don't think so, but it would be a nice story, wouldn't it?
I think you're going to be busy for the next 3 years. You're always busy on history. When you're not hashing, what are you up to in KL?
Oh, man. I spend a lot of time doing all kinds of things. I'm involved in some hiking groups, and I tend to get into some waterfalls and hike in the jungle. I'm probably in the jungle about 3 times a week for one reason or another.
Wow.
I'm a pretty avid diver, just trying to round out and put some color into my life. Good circle of friends. Beer more than just on a Monday night every now and again. You know how it is. But yeah. I've had to give up my climbing pursuits. I used to chase alpine expeditions, having been to Peru and Aconcagua in Argentina, Pakistan into Broad Peak. There's 8,000 meter peaks. So unfortunately, Broad Peak has been my nemesis. 3 times trying to get up that thing, 3 times shut out. But, so if anyone wants some ultra cold weather gear, those big down puffy things, I got it all.
Nice. Wow. It's great to connect with you, and thank you for everything you've done and everything you're doing. We're all going to benefit from this stuff and some of the clarifications, and look forward to seeing you in 2028. Are you going to Indonesia?
I tend not to, just because it doesn't work well with my schedule. It's not because of no reason not to, just not available actually.
Okay, so, well, then we'll see you at the 90th.
If you're popping through this way, you're more than welcome. And I'll make sure you get to the front of the line to get food first.
All right, PilsBarry, thank you very much. I will make available your email address on the podcast.
Just put it on the podcast. That would be fine.
Okay.
Perfect. Hey, thank
So
you very much for the time. I have enjoyed it. And
you're using your Gmail email address. What is that?
it's barrydawe@gmail.com.
I'll put that in writing with the publication.
Perfect.
And people can get to you, hopefully not to overburden you, but to send information and give you a thank you for everything that's gone on.
That'd be great. And if there's some emails there, the addresses, we might, as I say, getting information out about the 90th is always a challenge because some of the addresses are out of date. And so we'll probably, if folks are okay with it, I'll ask them all, of course, but use them a point of contact for 90th information as the plans develop and just publish it. And looking forward to
Okay,
that.
well, and we'll open it up for this podcast, and as anytime and then over the next coming years, anytime you think there's a major blurb, we can do a quick video check-in and broadcast whatever you want sent out.
Sure, that'd be awesome. Thanks very much. I'll definitely take you up on that.
It's a pleasure to meet you, and you're just a normal guy who climbs all these 1,000-meter peaks and has been with the hash and probably knows the history of Mother Hash better than anybody right now on the planet. So it's pretty much an honor to talk to you, and thank you very much for your time.
All the very best. I hope you make it to KL, and as I say, we'll look after you. All the best.
All right, on.
On.
To close the circle, here's the Hash Anthem sung by Mother Hash.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry